first thing I'd like to do is congratulate all of you students. It's been more than 50 years ago when I graduated with my bachelor's and master's. And have fun in school. Have a lot of fun. And I'll tell you this, you can do 10 times more than you think you can. Okay? And I honestly and sincerely mean that. You can do far more than you think you can. So never give up. Never, ever give up. Just stick with it. Okay, so tonight I'm going to just chat with you about how we use the Guadalupe Mountains to solve some real problems that we had. And they were kind of pretty serious problems. That's just a picture out there. And the neat thing is, there's the 4 highest peaks in the state of Texas. And that one's kind of near and dear to me because that's where I asked my wife to marry me. And she was dumb enough to say yes. How about that? You know, so, and now she says, here I am 75 years old, and she says, let's go back on our 25th anniversary. And I said, oh honey, I'm not too sure I can make it. But anyway, and she's a runner, so she could make it. So anyway, back in 1988, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, I was transferred to the Permian Basin. I had been working in other places, and they transferred me down, and they wanted me to work on this field called Eunice Monument. And it was a series of fields, not just one, it was a series of fields, and it produced from an interval called the Grayburg. Here's where the field trip's going to go. We're going to go see the Middle Permian. And you say, well, why do you want to see that? Well, it says, because that's where all the production's from, is in the Middle Permian. So it's a good reason to go. But, and this is just what the Grayburg looks like if you want to look at a slice here. Here's the Midland Basin, the Delaware Basin. The Val Verde Basin down here is already filled in. It's long gone. It's history. Goodbye. But the neat thing is all the green, these are the different Grayburg oil fields, and they're all in a dolomitized facies that goes up dip into an anhydritic dolomite facies and then into evaporites. So somewhere up here along these edges are a bunch of beautiful stratigraphic traps. So anyway, and so we were kind of focusing on this area right here. And here they are right here, right along the edge. And there's a series of 3 different fields that I worked on, and there was a 4th one up here that we had interest in, but Hess operated that. And these were operated by Chevron back then. And they were all unitized and infill drilled and put under water flood. They went from 80-acre spacing to 40-acre spacing. That might not mean much to you students, but they're just getting closer and closer together. And that, but they didn't have good response to the water flood. No banks of oil developed. And normally if you put water in the ground and you start pushing, the oil's going to get pushed along to the producing wells from the injection wells. And it wasn't happening, and they didn't know why. And so I had the opportunity, or the frustration, I don't know which way you want to put it, to work on these and to try to figure out what was going on with these fields. And so this was the first one we worked on right here, then we worked up here, then we worked down here. And the whole idea is, it's like the Romans, you want to divide and conquer. So here's the top, the north end of the field, the south end, and right through the middle there's a bunch of cord wells here. We sliced it in half, divide and conquer. And then we would come up here and quarter it, and then we'd quarter it down here to try to see what makes it tick. So this is up dip, this is down dip, heading into the basin. And so when we did, and we only had, at first, we only had that well, this well, and that well cored. And we saw that and we went, oh my gosh, what's going on? Up dip, the reservoir is only half the thickness of what it is down dip, and that's only 3 miles. And we go, gee, many Christmas, that's a lot of extra section. How's it connected together? And so this is kind of getting a little worrisome right here. Now we had these zonations going through here, and then we said, well, you know, it's not layer cake, it's not flat, like I was used to working up in the Williston Basin in the Mission Canyon. It's not a homoclinal ramp, it's something steeper. Maybe it's distally steepening, or maybe it's some kind of rimmed margin, like so, that Scott Tinker worked on for his PhD in McKittrick Canyon. But we weren't sure. We weren't sure. That was the catch. Because you can correlate till you're blue in the face, but are you correlating the right things? We weren't sure. So, but then we had a little bit of data. And so here's a cross-section through this field called Eunice Monument. Down dip, the reservoir is really nice. Up dip, it's not as well developed. And you go up dip and you start to get into these fingers of sandstones that are non-porous, and then there's evaporites. And so you have this beautiful up dip stratigraphic trap that's right through here. And down dip, you have this goat seep reef. And that's just kind of, not knowing too much about how everything fits together, kind of a look-see. But then we shot some seismic right through here, some pretty good resolution. So here's the top of the Grayburg. Here's the top of the underlying interval beneath it called the San Andres. And in between, we started to notice, oh, hey, there's another little reflector that pinches out right here. And here's another that comes up and comes through. And all of a sudden we realize the Grayburg is divided into a lower, middle, and upper something or other. And so we just knew that much. And then down dip right here, the whole front end of the Grayburg was eroded away, and the goat seep reef took that space right there. The erosional vacuity, as one of my professors used to call it. So anyway, that's kind of the big picture. So we realize there's some kind of lower, and back here will be the field right here. So we don't quite get to see this wedge right here, but so we see this and this. And we used to first say, oh, that's the lower and this is the upper. But now we realize there's a lower down here, a middle, and then an upper like so. So I was out at the Bureau of Economic Geology one day, and I bumped into Jerry Lucia, and I had known him before. And he said, well, Bob, what are you up to? And I said, well, I'm working on this reservoir, and my gosh, it's a little bit of a challenge because it doubles in thickness in just 3 miles. We're not sure how all the architecture's fitting together. And I said, and it's in the Grayburg. And Jerry says, oh, Bob, you ought to go out to Stone Canyon. The Grayburg outcrops there. And I said, oh, great. Where's Stone Canyon? And he says, oh, it's out in the Guadalupe Mountains. And I said, well, where's Stone Canyon? And so anyway, I finally found it, and it's right there. And these, just for a little sidekick, this is where we make all of our stops when we go out on the field trip. So we actually start in the Delaware Basin, go up to the shelf margin, then we go into the back shelf back here, like that. But there's Stone Canyon. So lo and behold, it's really pretty. It's a neat place. And there's a paved road that drives right by it. So, and here I was in Hobbs, New Mexico, and if I drove really fast, I could get there in 90 minutes from Hobbs. And so I got there, and I looked right here across, and I went, oh gosh, there's the top of the Grayburg. Here's the base of the Queen Formation above it. And oh, there's quite a bit of cover right here. But ooh, these cliffs right here, my goodness, maybe I could describe a section there, another one there, another one there, another one there. And maybe we could start looking at inner well scale reservoir heterogeneity. Maybe that's the problem that's affecting Eunice Monument. And the neat thing was these, as soon as I saw them, I knew I was looking at Uid grainstones right away because they make these beautiful cliffs. In an arid setting, grainstones will make beautiful, beautiful cliffs. And then in the slope, well, that's something a little bit different, and we'll have to find a place where we can maybe find more of the section. So then, and now that was looking south. Now this is looking north in that very same canyon, and here's those nice cliffs up here at the top. And so I go to my boss and I say, his name was Jim, and I said, Jim, hey, there's this canyon out in the Guadalupe Mountains and the outcrops there, and part of it looks like maybe what we've got in Eunice Monument. Why don't I go out and measure a section? And he says, well, okay. And so I went and I measured this little section right about right here. And this is what it looks like. That's the original kind of what I measured. And then we colored it up, and you got to make it look pretty and stuff like that. And so, because a little bit of color really helps a lot. You see relationships really well. And so here were grainstones right through here. And some pack stones, mud-dominated pack stones right in there. And so I thought, hey, you know, I wonder how that will fit in. And so before I go any further, just to make sure we're all on the same page, that's what a grainstone looks like. And a mud-dominated pack stone and a grain-dominated pack stone and a mud-dominated pack stone. And about this point, you're at the stratigraphic trap, somewhere right through here. So when I talk about grainstones, this is what they look like, okay? So I put it in to scale, and lo and behold, it fit perfectly. Very first try. And I go show this to my boss, and he's a big talker. And he sat there behind his desk, and he didn't say a thing. He was dumbfounded that one little section fit in our reservoir so good. And I said, Jim, maybe we ought to go do some more. Maybe we should do a bunch more in Stone Canyon and look at inner well scale heterogeneity. And not on 40-acre spacing, that's what the field was on. Let's do it on 10-acre spacing. So we went and measured, and this is just the north rim of the canyon. And here's the distances, you know, it's just a few hundred feet. And we had this beautiful marker we could walk along, so we knew right where we were at. Here's the top of the Grayburg right there. This is the base of the Queen Formation. And this is just the upper cliff forming part. There's more Grayburg down below, but there's a lot of cover. So we look at that, and all of a sudden we go, oh my goodness, you know, things are changing laterally quite a little bit. An awful lot of change through here. So maybe that's part of our problem. And so we started looking around, and then I thought, you know, there's some other canyons. Maybe we ought to keep chasing this upper cliff former up dip. So here's down dip in Stone Canyon, the south rim, the north rim. And then we went up into another canyon called Six Shooter and up into another canyon called Ira Barnett. And lo and behold, these big, thick, grainy packages start to thin way down. And we're going, oh, we're losing accommodation space. More accommodation space, less. Oh, they're grainier down here. They're starting to get more muddy up here. Maybe we ought to keep going up dip a little further. So we go up dip from Ira Barnett into another canyon I named after my boss because it's unnamed, and I called it Dunleavy. That was his last name. Made him feel good. And then another little canyon here that was all faulted up, and so I just called it Fault Canyon for lack of a better name. And lo and behold, the same thing's happening. Thicker bedding giving way to thinner bedding. Less accommodation space, more. Grainier, muddier. So when we tied those all together, that's what it looked like. Really grainy down here, and really muddy up here. Thicker bedding, thinner bedding, and we go, aha! Maybe that's why we're seeing this thickness change in the reservoir. Down dip, much more accommodation. Up dip, less accommodation. So up dip, we should see muddier rocks. Down dip, we should see grainier rocks. And that's exactly what we started to see. And so this is just kind of what, if we went a little bit further back into the lateral stratigraphic trap, here's what the anhydrite would look like, the orange. Here's what the halite would look like. And if we ever got to a paleo shoreline, here's what the red silt and sandstones look like. Thanks to the Bureau of Economic Geology, they had some cores so I could look at it in the Grayburg. But then here's what our reservoir looked like. A beautiful, beautiful, originally an Uid grainstone. It's completely dolomitized, and it underwent mechanical compaction. If it had not dolomitized early, it would look more like that, and it doesn't. So it was kind of during early burial when you're starting to put layer upon layer upon layer upon layer, and you're compacting all this magnesium-rich area here, and all the magnesium just coming down and dolomitizing the section to get that. So we kept looking around, and here's my wifey, the gal that was crazy enough to say yes on top of Guadalupe Peak. And here's some nice little cross-bedded Uid grainstones. And here they are actually forming in the Arabian Gulf when I had the opportunity to work there for a few years. And then just for fun, if you get rid of the grains, here's what the pore space looks like with the grains dissolved away. A pore cast, a relief pore cast. So nice big interparticle pores, and here's your little pore throats right there. So, and then we looked around a little bit further and we found, so that was back there. Now we're down in the middle ramp here, and we're finding these fusulinids, or what's left of the fusulinids. They like to dissolve away and leave molds behind in the outcrops. And here's my wifey again, and here we are looking at these moldic fusulinid packstones for the most part. And then we went a little bit further down dip, and we found one canyon where you could actually start to see sponges down in deeper water. And they'd be solitary here, and then they'd form little 1 meter colonies right here, and if you went down further, they were massive like this. Big, massive reef like that. And it's kind of neat. And the interesting thing was, it was karstified. And that's the top of the Grayburg. But it's down in deeper water. And so we figured it took about maybe a 225-foot drop in sea level to get some of this exposed down here. So we were starting to learn a little bit about the Grayburg and that. So anyway, so we go back to this canyon, and I go back and I say, back to my boss, Jim, and I say, hey Jim, you know what? We're finding enough data out here. Maybe we have the whole reservoir steering us in the face, and we don't even realize it if we go up dip far enough and if we go down dip far enough through all these canyons and these escarpments. And if we can find sections where we can get a complete measured section, maybe we can reconstruct the whole reservoir. And so he said, oh, okay, let's give it a go. And we'd only do this 1 or 2 days out of the week, or maybe only 1 day out of the week. Because then we had to work on the cores from the field. And lo and behold, here's what we ended up with right here. Here's just one of the little outcrops right here that we looked at, and that's the reservoir quality in outcrop. It's pretty good. And if we zoom in a little bit closer, that's it. A little bit more detail, and lo and behold, when all was said and done, we see the same 300-foot thickness up here like we do in Eunice Monument. And when we went down dip, lo and behold, we seen the same thickness down dip, about 600 foot of section. And we see the same lithofacies in the same places. And we go, oh boy, we've died and gone to heaven. This is perfect. This can lead us. And so we're just going from more accommodation space down dip up to less accommodation space up dip. Grainier here, muddier back there, and the reason the rest of this isn't there, that's where the evaporites should have been, and they've been dissolved away. And so it's kind of neat. So the red are Uid grainstones that are cross-bedded. This kind of pinkish rosy color, that is pelloid grainstones, and then this is grain-dominated packstones, all this orange right through here, like so. And the green are fusulinids that are transgressing back. And these lighter green are fusulinid pore horizons as well. And the yellow are siliciclastic horizons that are trapped on the shelf. And we thought, how in the world, why didn't those just keep going down dip and go in the basin? And well, when we finally built this, we realized they were being trapped in paleotopographic lows. And it made perfectly good sense why they were still sitting there staring at us in that. But they made great, great surfaces to correlate with. You could walk on these surfaces. They made nice little areas next to the slope would be up here, and there would be a little ledge right there, and you could walk along those for miles upon miles. So we walked all of this up dip and down dip. It was a lot of fun, and I was a lot younger then, and I could do stuff like that. If I tried it now, I'd kill myself. So we go back, and we say, well, you know, down dip, there should be grainier rocks. Up dip, there should be muddier rocks. That's precisely what we see. Well, let's try to tie everything together. And lo and behold, it starts to look like it'll tie together. And we were worried we had packages down here that might not tie up dip, but it looked like they were going to do that. And this was really good. So we started making little cartoons and stuff like that, showing better quality reservoir, lower quality reservoir. Somewhere up here is a stratigraphic trap. And then we said, well, you know, I wonder if we can see that on the well logs. And sure enough, you could see more porosity here, less porosity here, in the very same location, just like that. So, and then, more recently, bless his heart, Jason Rush with Oxy, he did his PhD out there, down dip. We were way up dip, way back up here. But down dip, he was actually able to show what the lower looked like and when it was onlapping, what the middle Grayburg looked like in its onlap, and what the upper Grayburg looked like when it's offlapping. And here's the big erosional escarpment, and there's the Goat Sea Reef. So kind of neat to see that. He just presented this just last year. So anyway, here we are. We're slicing this field here in half. Then we come up here to quarter it, and we get a really nice surprise in this one well right here. Here's the core description. Here's the upper 3 zones of the Grayburg, and then here's the 4th zone here. And lo and behold, we run into a sinkhole full of collapsed breccia, and it was all angular. None of it had been washed in. And we went, oh my goodness, there must be a heck of a unconformity right across here. And so we take a look at that and we go, oh yeah. So we've got an unconformity on the top of the Grayburg here, and eventually it cuts away all the Grayburg, and then here's the top of the San Andres right here with an unconformity on it. And then here in the middle, here's another one that we didn't know was there before till we saw that particular core. And it started to make a lot of sense, because that meant there was probably a little muddy transgressive surfaces right here that made a little seal right through here. So people that were drilling wells in the past right here and would just barely come into the Grayburg, they thought they were draining all of this. And lo and behold, they weren't. They were only draining the upper part. And once they realized this, and this was in the early 90s, folks that had fields along the Northwest Shelf in the Grayburg found out they had to come back down and re-drill down into this middle, this lower part of the Grayburg right here, to drain that part of the reservoir. So they hadn't quite done their homework very good. And so that cost them a lot more money. But that's just life sometimes. So you end up having an unconformable surface across here, another one across here, and then another right through the middle right there. And we started to get extra cores here. I put the years when we got these extra cores in here. And so you start to look at the mess that is starting to develop. And just in lateral changes in thickness is starting to get heterogeneous really quick and give you some problems here. But we ended up with this model right here. And that's on a cycle for cycle basis. And that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work. So if you're a manager, you're saying, do I really want my geologist spending all this extra time doing that? Think about that for a little bit while we go on, okay? But anyway, down here, the red, those are Uid grainstones that have been dolomitized. The orange is our grain-dominated pack stones. These blues are mud-dominated pack stones, and the grays back here are dolowhack stones, and a couple of mudstones, but not too many. So that's what it looks like. And if we get rid of all the color, this is what it looks like for the bounding surfaces, the exposure surfaces up dip, going down to conformable surfaces down dip. Now, if you're a manager, again, you're saying, why is he doing all this work? Isn't this an overkill?
Conformity.
Pardon?
Conformity.
We'll get to it. We'll get to it. Okay, so now the next little interesting puzzle was, it's not a nice, beautiful, asymmetric anticline going into the basin. Here's up dip, here's down dip. It looks like a double-humped camel. It kind of looks strange. You say, geez, is that the really right geometries? And the answer is, yes, it is. And so we noticed that the upper part up in here would just produce oil only, no water, but down through here, it would produce a mixture of oil and water. And further down, water only, but in the core from here down was still oil stained. So we found out, oh, we got a little residual oil zone right here too. And we were sitting on what's called the Eunice High, this big structural block right here. But we've got this weird kind of double-shaped camel shape. And the reason for that is that on a really small scale, the basement had to be broken up like that to create kind of a double humped shape like that. So, and then the reason there was all this water down here, because this field was found in 1929, a long time ago, a galaxy far, far away. And so there's a big pressure drop inside the reservoir from production, and that's sucking in water from the Goat Seat Reef. This was fresh water that was being sucked in right here. And so here's edge water coming into the reservoir. So that's why we don't see production here. We see a mixture of oil and water production here. And then up here, it's fairly oil clean with no water. So we go back to these outcrops. And I take the engineers out there. And they were actually better students because they were like a fish out of water. They believed everything I said. The geologist, oh, no, Bob, that can't be that way. And I said, yes, it can. Well, they get out here, they look at this, and I show them a high perm streak that's full of a lot of grainstone, that's full of a lot of porosity and permeability. And they say, Bob, we want to go walk a high perm streak. And I say, oh, I know the perfect one. It's this guy right through here. And they said, okay, let's go next Monday. I said, oh, slow down. Let me go out and measure a section of just this one grainstone cycle and an overlying one as a datum. And we'll go from here up into the next canyon and up into the next canyon, and we'll walk it out till we see it pinch out. And so they said, oh, okay. So we went and I went and measured a bunch of sections, and this is what it looks like down dip. This is what it looks like up dip when you go from about 12 foot of dolo grainstone in this one little cycle. Here it is about down to 18 inches. And then you go a few hundred feet over here, and bingo, there's the stratigraphic trap. And that was 10,000 feet up from where that was from. That was pretty neat. So we went out and we walked it. And so we started down here and we walked along and we walked along and we walked along. But we started to run into a few problems. And that was this grainstone here looked like it was wedging out like so. And then another one was starting. And then another one was starting. So what we started on here and what we ended on here, even though we thought we were in the same little package of strata, because here's this sandstone at the base and we could walk it from here all the way to there. Well, lo and behold, when you put everything back to scale, there were actually 5 shingled packages in there. So all of a sudden, what we thought was a fairly simple looking reservoir turned out to be even more complicated, much more complicated. So we were starting to see reservoir heterogeneity kind of getting in our face there just a little bit. So we go back and here's what we've got to work with. And we end up with this model right here, like so. And then here comes the concerns. So here you are. If you're managers now, do you want me to do all of this work? And maybe the first question would be, why do all this work? The next question would be, isn't this an academic exercise? And the third question, that'll come back to your students now, isn't this something you do in graduate school and present at conventions? And kind of, boy, look what I did, you know. And then the last would be, the oil and gas business is about making money. Now those are serious concerns, really serious concerns. Well, let me show you what we ended up doing. Here's a little model we made right here, right through this field called Arrowhead right here. More grain rich here. Here's the Dola grain stones. Here's the grain-dominated pack stones. Here's the mud-dominated pack stones. Better reservoir potential, poorer reservoir potential inside the reservoir, okay? And here are the sandstones again that are trapped in there. They can't get down into the basin. So we're going to unitize this field. This is in 1992. Some of you students, were you born in 1992? Yes, no? I see heads going, no, okay, so you're hearing an old man talk, okay? So anyway, we go to unitize this field. This is down dip, this is up dip. And right away, the engineers say, we don't want to unitize the outer third of this reservoir. Now, if we go back, here's the outer third. It's grainier, it's more porous, it's more permeable. And we say, why on earth don't you want to unitize that other part? And they say, because it produces water. And we said, we know it produces water. And it produces in these little, thin, little porosity intervals that look like that. They're grain stones. They're 18 inches thick. And there's only 4 of them. There's only 4. And that whole section is 285 feet thick. Do you want to abandon a third of the reservoir for just 6 feet of section? We've mapped it out. Just don't complete in them. And they go, oh, okay. So, and I'm not making fun of the engineers. That was a real concern because they were worried about the water. And it's coming in from down dip. It's just being sucked in by a drop in pressure in the reservoir. But because we did this work, they said, okay, we're going to unitize the whole field. We'll stay away from those 4 horizons. I see a question already.
Were they accustomed to doing open hole completions?
Some was open hole and some were cased. I think the injection wells were open hole. So what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to isolate away from these intervals. Okay? So, but that's a real world concern. And we overcame it because we spent the time to map these itty bitty little horizons like these out and do our homework real carefully. So then, up in the northern end of Eunice Monument, South Unit, there was another little problem between this well and this well, and we realized we had a ramp crest shoal, really porous and permeable rock right here. We had a core here, we had a core here, we had another core to the north just right here, and a little core to the side right there. And when we looked at it, it was only 5 feet thick, and it was a grainstone. And it had, to the best we could figure out, not quite a Darcy of permeability, about 750 millidarcies. This was our big headache in the subsurface, and that was the same horizon I took the engineers to in Outcrop. We were able to correlate it 100 miles back to the Guadalupe Mountains, and that's what we walked, was this little horizon right here. Well, anyway, here's what was happening. Here's an injection well. They're injecting 800 barrels of water a day. And it was going over here on this high perm streak, and it was being produced out of this well, and all they were doing was cycling water like that, and chewing up a lot of money, a lot of energy and stuff like that. Nothing was happening. So we said, well, you know, maybe we ought to just isolate this right here. So we squeezed it with good old Class H concrete, and right away, this built up pressure. They were injecting on vacuum, 800 barrels a day on vacuum. Now it started to produce pressure. And so a month later, a water-free oil bank popped through to this well here to the side. And right then we said, oh my gosh, we've got it made. You know, we're doing conformance work. And that stands for vertical sweep efficiency, where you try to sweep all the porous permeable intervals you can but the high perm intervals are going to preferentially take all the injected fluid, and we were isolating and making the water go and actually work for us instead of just being a royal headache. So it worked really well. We did this about 12 times in some of these reservoirs here. So we come back to these management concerns, and they say, why do all this work? Well, the answer is you need to know your reservoir, number one. Number two, isn't this an academic exercise? And the answer is no. This is reservoir characterization. You need to collect data and sift through that data and make sense of the data. And then, isn't this something to be done in graduate school and presented at conventions? No, no, this is how you solve reservoir conformance issues. And then the last is, the oil and gas business is about making money, and the answer is yes, it's about making money, lots of money. But the surprising thing is, most people don't do this kind of work in conventional reservoirs. And I don't know why not, because once you understand the process, it's pretty straightforward, it's pretty simple. So, let's see here, I forgot how to turn this. Let's see here. I just have to be smarter than the machine. Whoops, that wasn't smart. Okay, here we go. Oh, okay. And then, once we learned how to do all this, once the outcrops had shown us the way, so to speak, we could go to other reservoirs. So we went to this other reservoir down here called McElroy, and it's from the Grayburg. That's a Grayburg reservoir again. And this time it was much easier to do all this work because we understood that up dip you're running out of accommodation space, down dip you're going from more grainy rocks to more muddy rocks, up dip. And it was much, much easier to do this process again. So, now the last little thing is just a little push for the field trip, and that is, if you come out on the field trip, this is what you'll come home with. A hand-drawn cross-section on a composite scale, so kind of a big scale, following timelines. We'll start out in the basin, looking at here, and then we'll look here, and then we'll go back to the inside here, the inner ramp, the inner shelf side. The evaporites we won't get to see much, but you'll end up being able to walk home with your own hand-drawn crappie that looks like that. And if you're a good drawer and a good artist, it'll look like a Mona Lisa. And if you're a bad artist, it'll look like a Picasso. Okay? So that's a little push for that. And that's it. Thanks for coming out and listening.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment on your talk.
Okay.
One, thank you very much. It was very enjoyable, very enlightening. And I have a comment to our students here tonight. And I want to comment particularly on two things that you've seen tonight. One is what Bob showed up there were original observations. And what a great geologist does is see original observations and make sense out of them. Original observations, not just following the model, it's seeing other things within that rock. You guys did that, and you put it into a context. Secondly, it's what Tom pointed out over here, is what people had in mind without thinking about the problem. You have to address how this thing fits in and understand these people have preconceived notions, and if they're open hole completions, you guys don't know about open hole completions, but basically everything comes out of the hole.
Yeah.
Versus individual and discrete completions in there. And pointing out those two things on there as to what you see tonight, those are two valuable things that if you can do them in your career, good on you.
Yeah. Great. Very kind. Very kind. Yeah. It's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun if you enjoy detail. If you don't enjoy detail, don't get in this line of work. Okay? Other questions? Anything else, you know? Yes, sir.
I'll get a microphone.
Oh.
I'm coming. Got my tennies on.
I
Oh, got turned on.
gotta explain to my daughter that this is a scene from Lonesome Dove.
Yes, yes.
She just asked to borrow my copy of it.
Yeah.
I'm a Gulf Coast geologist historically, but I spent 2 years at Amoco working in the Permian Basin, which I thought was a horrible thing because everybody was doing exciting stuff offshore. What do you learn from working the Permian Basin? Cross sections.
That's right.
Just what Dick was referring to. You
Yeah.
have to make subsurface geologic cross sections. When I got my master's degree at the University of Houston under Milton Dobrin, he was a very well-known geophysicist. Thank you. He had one piece of advice. He said, remember, a seismic line is not a subsurface cross-section. It's
That's
in
true.
velocity, it's not in depth.
Yep.
And you're going to get screwed up if you start forgetting that important section.
That's true.
So you have very important lessons for us. Thank you.
No, thanks. Any other questions? Please ask away. Yes, Walter.
It looks like to me that your gravestones had a reason to be localized there. Was that the basement influence?
Well, yeah, they were. You're coming out of the Delaware Basin, and here's the perfect place to set up a shoal.
Right.
And then depending on little rises and falls in sea level to make all these cycles, they tended to stay there. And then the fingers went up dip into the inner ramp during the transgressions.
Right.
And then they would kind of come back and kind of stay there in that same area. And so this is not really, as we were saying at our table, it's really not ice house, it's really not greenhouse. It's more of a transitional time where you're just shoaling and creating lots of grainy rocks. If you want to see a modern example, go to the north end of Andros Island, and there's a beautiful Uwit shoal right there. It's just beautiful. It's great, yeah.
So do you see post-deposition tilting?
Oh, yeah.
Tilting of the basin.
Yeah.
So if you restored it to depositional time, you would have a stratigraphically built up structure.
Yeah.
And then now it's three-way with the tilt into the basin.
Oh, yeah. See, everything's kind of sticking there in that same place. And what I didn't show you is even during deposition, there was a little bit of structural movement. And an anticline was actually trying to form just a little subtle uplift during deposition. So it was the perfect place for if something's trying to do this. Right in front, right here, is where waves are concentrating all the energy, and that's where all the grainstones are going to form, right there. Right there. Just beautiful. Just
All right,
beautiful
thanks.
stuff.
So these little transgressional fingers that you were talking about?
Pardon?
In the petrography, or the little transgressional fingers that you're talking about?
Yeah.
Did you tend to see some lag deposits in the base of those?
No, the lags were on the exposure surfaces down dip, yeah. That's where they were. Yes, Norman?
Hello, Dr. Lindsay. As always, great talk. Most of the thin sections that we're showing look like they were highly dolomitized.
Oh, yeah.
How has the dolomitization events helped or hindered the production quality?
That's a great question. We're lucky. This was fabric preserving dolomitization. There's another type that's fabric destructive. And when that happens, you have a really hard time even seeing an Uwit. You'll see a little ring of crystals, and that's about it. But this was fabric preserving, and we were lucky. So you could see the fabric great. But even having doing that, when I was measuring the section, every time, if this was a bed, I'd clip off a piece about here and another one down here, and I would look at that piece, not really quick. I would wet it and look at it with the direct sunlight for 45 seconds to make sure what I was really looking at. So I took my time. That little dinky section we did, it took 2 days, and it was only about 50 feet, 60 feet thick. It wasn't very thick. We took our time, and we did our work very, very carefully, so we wouldn't make boo-boos. Now, I know some folks will go out and measure a section, and they'll do 1,000 foot in a day. And I'd hate to be the company paying for that, because you wouldn't get much out of it. You have to do your detail work, very, very detailed work. Anything else? Yes, sir. Oops.
Can you hear me? Okay,
Yes.
there we go. So the first field you spoke of, it was on the northwest side of the CBP, right? And then the second field, McElroy, is on the southeast.
Southeast, yeah, yep.
And I think it maybe ties to the first map you showed, and I guess the idea being that this stratigraphic trap basically goes around the entirety of the CBP there, on both sides, with it exposed in the middle of it?
Up dip, you have pinch outs of porosity in both of those reservoirs, yes. They're both beautiful combination structural stratigraphic traps. They're gorgeous, yeah. So up dip, they're, in Eunice Mountain, it's 300 feet thick, down dip is 600. McElroy, it's about the same, about 300, 250 feet up dip. Down dip is a little bit thicker, it's maybe more like 700 feet, something like that. But we see the same in both. So once we learned from the outcrops, we understood things were more predictive. We just realized we were going to go from more accommodation space to less, grainier to muddier. And that took a lot of worries and concerns away. A lot, yeah. Yes, sir. Anything else? If not, thanks for listening to me.
I think Bob's talk tonight is really a timely reminder about the importance of geological field work to all of us. It certainly reminded me a lot of things I tend to forget when I was sitting in front of my computer looking at the seismic line. I think it reminded us, need to go back to the basics. The value of looking at the real rocks, working in the field, examining the rocks and minerals at both outcrop and microscope levels. I hope you will consider joining Bob on the Guadalupe Mountain field trip that's coming up on April 4th to the 7th. The date has changed. If you've seen the earlier communication coming out of HGS, it used to be in the middle of March, but now the new dates are April 4th to the 7th. If you cannot join them on the field trip, then try to find yourself an opportunity to go on a field trip of your choice this year. Enjoy the nature. I think that's the reason most of us became geologists in the first place. But before we close tonight, I would also like to thank our sponsors again and all our attendees once again for a wonderful evening together. I also want to thank the Calvert and the Foundation committee volunteers for an outstanding job in engaging the faculty and students in our universities, managing and raising funds and giving awards to our deserving students. Special thanks to our program coordinator, Linda Sternbach of Star Creek Energy, and for proposing the topic this year. And, she, of course, does way more than that, but this is the prominent contribution. And also thanks to the HGS Scholarship Committee sponsorship chair, Jeff Lund, who's the gentleman sitting here, for continuing leading on for the scholarship programs, so we could continue to support the students for many years to come. And also to the HGS Office Director, Andrea Peoples, who's not here, but she did a huge amount of work to take care of the logistics and preparing for this event. So I hope to see many of you again at the 2025 HGS Scholarship Night. Meanwhile, if you have any suggestions for the topics you want to hear next year, please contact us, reach out to me or anyone at the HGS office. We love to hear different ideas. I hope you have enjoyed the evening and will drive home safely. We hope to see you at our future HGS events. Visit www.hgs.org. You're going to find the calendar. We have all our events published there. A range of events from science education, outreach, field trip, mineral sales, to kids, family events, you name it, you will find it. HGS is the home base and the family for everyone who loves geology And so please look for the events on our website. So with that, I will say good night to all of you, and thank you so much for coming. Hope to see you again.